Hello Sagittarius, and welcome to your year 2023 Astrology and Horoscope forecast. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. What I'm going to do first is outline how I'm going to structure the video. Now, of course, this is a year with big changes. Saturn moves into your sector of emotion, home, family, 7th of March. We have Pluto going into the sign of Aquarius briefly, 23rd of March. We also have Jupiter, your ruler, moving into your sector of health and well-being on the 16th of May. So that's really exciting. Can't wait to tell you about that. But we have the North Node on the 12th of July reversing back into your sector of opportunity, self-expression, creativity, flair and joys for the first time in 18 and a half years. So that's also delightful. So I'm going to obviously go through those for you. But it's important to understand what we bring into each year, and the total lunar eclipse of the 8th of November 2022 was very potent, and that brings an energy into the first 4 months of the year. So I need to outline that to you. Then of course we have the quadrant. So the year itself is 52 weeks from the 1st of January, but the Western tropical astrological calendar starts with the spring equinox this year on the 20th of March, and that divides the year into 4 units of 13 weeks based on the seasons. So what I want to do is go through each of those seasons for you, because they provide a very compelling influence for the 13 weeks following. But the first season we need to look at is the last winter solstice of 2022, the Cardinal Quadrant, when the Sun moves into Capricorn, and Jupiter, your ruler, is very influential on that event, and that provides a backdrop for around about the first 12 weeks of the new year until we get to the spring or vernal equinox. And also we need to look at the solar return for the year. So that's the layout of your celestial map as we go into the new year. And Jupiter again forging a very important alliance with Mars. Mars, the planet of passion, which is in your sector of relating through to the 25th of March. And of course, when it comes to relating, Venus, the planet of love and relating, is in your sector of growth and opportunity, the 9th house, for 4.5 long months in your sister fire sign of Leo. So I need to talk you through that. Plus we have a glorious solar eclipse on the 20th and 21st of April, and Jupiter, your ruler, is involved in that as well. So crucial to outline that, because that provides 6 months of energy. And then we have a second solar eclipse in your sector of friendship and long-term future planning, and that's in October. So a lot to get through. Please stay with me, because I will be going through each of the weeks of this year in forensic detail, but also focusing on these more structural and strategic influences which are going to be crucial to you. Now, if you are new to my channel, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you're a long-term follower, thank you so much for your support. And if you would like to understand what year 2023 will hold for you personally beyond this zodiac forecast, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date or place of birth, I will give you your year 2023 forecast. Also, the rest of year 2022 free if you order in 22, plus your roadmap for life, your character analysis, and you can get the whole package 30% off. This is totally unique to you and will give you searing insights into your future prospects. Please see the link below for more. So Sagittarius, let's take a look first of all at that lunar eclipse of the 8th of November. Very powerful for us all, but for you it occurred in house 6, which means that your Sun at that point was in house 12, very much to do with the spiritual, psychological and emotional dimension, whereas the moon in the more practical 6th house, but alongside Uranus. Uranus, a very changeable, disruptive influence, very restless. And both the Sun and the Moon and Uranus are being T-squared by the restrictive energies of Saturn. Therefore, conversation or dialogue, information that's shared, could have the potential to be rather over-arousing right through the first 4 months of this new year. So I think as you came to the end of 22, a little bit of stress may have been washing around, particularly if you find it a little bit difficult to be with your more emotional side. If you're someone who's always trying to move on to the next positive encounter, which is very Sagittarian, really important to take note of that total lunar eclipse. Now, the 4th cardinal quadrant of 22, providing that backdrop for the first 12 weeks of 23, saw Jupiter, your ruler, in an exact square with the Sun. So Jupiter's in the part of your horoscope to do with exuberance, the 5th house, lovely location. But the Sun, for you, is in house 2. So I think it's important for the first 12 weeks of 2023 not to be too gung-ho when it comes to resources. We all know that we're facing lots of headwinds when it comes to costs, interest rates, general instability around the financial part of our existence. And I think this particular aspect is just saying to you that natural, exuberant, upbeat and pretty confident and optimistic side of your nature is a wonderful thing. But when it comes to the resources you've got, try to only invest in things that you've really done your research. It's not a time to be too speculative. I feel that's the overall influence of that aspect. But also Mars and the Moon are in opposition. The Moon's actually in your sign at this part of the year, but it's in opposition to Mars. This can create quite a lot of erratic energy because Mars is quite a restless influence. It's in a retrograde in your opposite sign, so it's going to make you more assertive around your boundaries, but the Moon in your own sign can make you sort of react quite quickly. So that's a high intensity influence, so just be conscious of that. But the midpoint between the Sun in Capricorn and the Moon in Sagittarius is actually in your sign, but it is squaring the rather dreamy and drifting influence of Neptune, which has been causing really quite a tricky impact on your sign, particularly since 2012. Someone asked me the other day, when does that end? Well, by spring 2025, Neptune will have made way into the sign of Aries, but also Saturn is going to be moving in that spring out of your 4th house, where it's going to move into this March the 7th. So I just feel that the midpoint is really the energy that you take into the first 12 weeks, and it gives you a real opportunity to show your enthusiasm because it's a Sagittarius energy. But Neptune there is just saying when it comes to where you live, how you live there, more emotional issues, then things can be a little unclear. Now that takes us to the solar return, but that's really exciting for you because Jupiter, although it's potentially a little bit challenging on that cardinal quadrant, it's actually on the solar return in a brilliant link with Mars. So when these two are collaborating well, as they are here, it can give you passion, determination, enthusiasm and drive. But this is an energy which is going to provide a backdrop for the whole of 2023, unlike those cardinal quadrants which just impact 13 weeks. So really exciting. Mars is in a retrograde as you begin the year, so care is needed around how you interact with others, but there could be someone that you're really having a very lively connection with. It could even be all the way to romantic. Also, as we start this year, Venus and Pluto are in a conjunction, and I can tell you that can bring some better news financially throughout 23. Just be mindful, Mercury is retrograde at the turn of the year. So managing your finances in a very precise and meticulous way, even though there can be beneficial opportunities, is really important. Also, the Sun is in a trine with Uranus. This is the same as the year before. So it's saying to you, being open to new techniques about how you live in your everyday world, but also your work. But anything to do with innovation, something you often have a real appetite for, can really work well. So if you have old skills and experiences and knowledge that can be remodeled for the world that we're living in, which is fast changing, then this year gives you a great opportunity to keep evolving very positively. So that's superb. But the midpoint on the turn of the year is actually in the sign of Pisces. So I feel a need for greater meaning around your emotions is going to come from this, but also from the arrival of Saturn. And it could be much to do with where you live, or if you've been thinking about a new addition, the structure of your family generally is going to be a big theme for 2023. But that midpoint does square up with Mars. So there could be some tensions at times within the family dynamic, particularly if you feel that other people are not getting where you're coming from as quickly as you would like, and some impatience could be engendered. But that gives you a little bit of a flavour of what you can expect for the backdrop of the year. But that chance to improve your finances is there, as long as you're very mindful of the detail of things. But also, I feel that, there is a need that's going to be developing for you to become much more au fait about understanding what makes you really tick as an emotional being, because as I've often said, your default over many years is, when you have setbacks, is to dust yourself down and go again on the next exciting adventure. But that can lead to bits and pieces of residue building up that don't get sorted out and resolved. So this year is a chance to really get much clearer about your personal emotional identity and your role within your family or within your community. But where you live is a massive part of this process. So that brings us into the early part of January, and Mars on the 12th ends its retrograde and will be in a very dynamic forward motion through to the 25th of March. And if you do want to bring more life and vibrancy into your relationships, Mars will help you. It can help you to assert your boundaries. People who have Mars in the 7th house in their natal charts can sometimes find it a little bit difficult to get the balance between what they want and what they're prepared to give. So just be aware of your passion can be terrific in this first 3 months of the year, but important just to stay sensitive to those you're interacting with. January the 18th, Mercury goes direct in that second house. If you have been waiting for some financial news, it should soon come. January the 21st, the new moon in Aquarius is lovely, because this brings a vibrancy to your thinking. You're someone with a great curiosity very often, but on this event, Venus is in a conjunction with Saturn. It could be a time over the following 4 weeks when you do say how you feel about an issue to do with a neighbour or a sibling or around your community, but the chances are you can assert yourself with firmness and clarity. But if there is a relationship that's been a little bit more fair weather, I think Saturn on Venus could see you rethink, and it could see you decide, not necessarily a romantic relationship, could even be someone you chat to online or more locally. So Saturn just brings a bit of coolness to the affection of Venus. Now, on January the 22nd, Uranus ends its retrograde. If you have really been trying to find the right role for yourself when it comes to your work, or your everyday life structure. I think since March 2019, but even in the 5 months that Uranus was in Taurus in 2018, you could have since then been sort of trying to flex, and especially with COVID, just trying to find the way that that need to be a free and independent person can work with in some way providing services to others. So it may have been a bit of a juggle, but I think Uranus going forwards could take a bit of pressure off your nervous system, especially if you have been feeling quite tired. February the 20th sees a new moon in your sector of home and emotion, but this one is conjunct Saturn. The reason for this is that Saturn's right at the end of Aquarius, the new moon's right at the start of Pisces, so it's a disassociate connection, but very close. If there is something you're unhappy about around where you live or around a family matter, the new moon linked to Saturn can give you the determination and the desire to start to really sort this out. Of course, on March the 7th, Saturn moves into your 4th house. Saturn's got a mighty reputation. It is justified. It can be difficult. It cools things down. It can be restraining and restricting. But also, it can help us if we really work hard to understand how the part of our chart that it's influencing, how we can work with that to gain much greater insight. So, right through to April 2025, it's all down to you. Neptune's left you a little bit confused in recent years. I also feel that the midpoint that occurred at the turn of the year, obviously in Pisces, is pushing you to be much more aware of your emotional needs, and Saturn is going to be pushing you in that direction too. March the 14th, however, does see a square, the third, between Mars and Neptune. If this rings a bell, the whole of October and November last year were afflicted by this. This is the exact point this occurs, but it is impacting your 4th and 7th houses. So again, emotional communication could be a bit hazy off the back of this event. So important to be as clear as you possibly can, and that is not always easy to get with Neptune. Mars is about desire, so for example, if you went on a date with someone around this time and they seemed a bit elusive or evasive or mysterious, your desire to connect with them in quite an urgent way, Mars in the 7th house, could be conflicted by not quite knowing where they're coming from, or perhaps you're a little bit confused. For example, being very attracted to someone that maybe at heart you know emotionally isn't quite the right match for you. March the 20th, however, is absolutely fantastic. We have the spring equinox. So this is the beginning of the Western tropical astrological calendar, and it ushers in Quadrant 1, Cardinal Quadrant 1, and Aries. The Sun moves into the sign of Aries, which of course is your sister fire sign. For you, this is house 5. This is about passion, initiating new things. That 4th house energy, which has been very strong, a little introspective, this is more outgoing. However, ironically, the next day we have the first of 2 new moons in Aries, and the irony comes from the fact that Mars, now very late in Gemini, is squaring up with this event. So as much as you might be really attracted to someone, because Mars is nearly in your 8th house, a very sexual dimension may be involved in that attraction. But of course Mars brings that urgency, but also that desire. And the Sun in your 5th house for the following 13 weeks as an overall quadrant influence is about really living in the moment, listening to your hunches. So, this is going to be an interesting new moon for you. It can encourage you, but you just need to know when to resist temptation in some ways. But also, when the Sun moves and we have the new moon, the midpoint again is in Pisces, and it is conjunct Neptune and also squaring Mars. So this is because of the late position of the midpoint at 24 degrees being conjunct Neptune. Mars is actually about 27 degrees in Gemini, but in terms of the new moon, it's a dissociate square. So that's why we've got these two quite contrasting influences. So again, getting clear about what you need emotionally, another pointer that this is going to be a major theme of this year. I do think a lot of the YouTube astrologers will put the major emphasis on Saturn and Pluto. It's understandable, they're huge changes, especially Saturn because Pluto is more temporary. But Neptune is a major player when we really drill down and get more detailed understanding of the influences that are being forged. However, Venus at this part of the year is in your 6th house, so your ability to relate well and skillfully to people can definitely be an asset. On March the 23rd, however, Pluto does move out of your 2nd solar house, where it's been making you much more mindful of your values since 2008. But it is a temporary change because by June the 11th, it's back in your 2nd house. Maybe this taster of what's to come more long term from January 24 is about how you think, your ideals, your belief system, but also the things that you're passionate about expressing can come a bit more into the year at this juncture. March the 23rd sees Mars move into your 8th house. If there is somebody that you've really been attracted to, it could get very hot and steamy in the following 6 weeks. If there's someone you've been struggling to get an understanding about, Mars moving into the 8th house gives you a more psychological desire to get beneath the surface of where they're coming from. Also, in a more practical sense, Mars moving into the 8th house can give you the desire to really up your energy when it comes to your long-term financial prospects. Now, April the 20th, 21st sees that solar eclipse. So the second new moon in the sign of Aries. Why this is particularly significant for you is the 5th house is where we can really shine. So you've got 2 lots of 5th house energy. They're just complicated a little bit on the first one by that midpoint conjunct Neptune and the square with Mars. This second one sees a conjunction with your ruler Jupiter. So this is really exciting. So the next 6 months, it's really saying to you, look to find ways to be as creative as possible because you can manifest some really wonderful things, particularly with the North Node arriving in this sector for the first time in 18 and a half years on July the 12th. If you're older, what were you doing 18 and a half years ago? That will give you a little bit of a clue of the period that you're entering into with the support of the North Node. But back to that eclipse, it is squaring up to the late positioned Pluto on that cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius. And when Pluto and Jupiter are in a right angle, it can give us enormous desire to achieve what we want. So just be aware you can be a force to be reckoned with in the following half year. May the 1st, Mercury goes into the second of its retrogrades of the year, this time in Taurus. Taurus is about everyday money. Remember, you have to look after your everyday money with great precision this year because Mercury was retrograde at the start of the year in the sign of Capricorn, which is your 2nd solar house. And of course, Capricorn is very businesslike, and Taurus can be as well. Taurus, though, can be sometimes more to do with our desire to splash out. But I think because it's your 6th house, this is to do with appointments, precision, refinements, virtue. So Mercury here through to the 15th is asking you to find ways that you can clean up your situation a little bit, be a bit more virtuous. Doesn't sound very sexy, but you have got that very sexy solar eclipse to support you. The lunar eclipse, which occurs on the 5th and 6th of May, depending on where you are in the world, that's actually forging conjunction with Uranus, but this time it's the Sun conjunct Uranus, and the Moon is actually in the deep feeling sign of Scorpio. So for you, the eclipse is in your 12th house. So this is a reflection, an opposition of what we experienced on the 8th of November last year. So it's asking you really to think about perhaps the parts of yourself you don't feel quite so at ease with. Many of us have parts of ourselves that we're still working at, trying to understand, perhaps grappling with in some kind of way. So there can still be the need to do that, to find a more holistic version of yourself. Mercury direct on the 15th, signs of relief, especially about things like appointments. I've been trying to get through to the hospital today to organise one. The phones are busy. Very classic Mercury retrograde in the 6th house of appointments. May the 16th, your ruler Jupiter, however, moves into Taurus, augmenting the now forward motion position of Mercury, but of course the restless energy of Uranus. So Jupiter is going to be in this location for over a year, 1 year and 9 days to be precise. So it's back into its more normal format. Over the last couple of years it's gone through 4 lots of signs, so that's been a little bit disruptive. But Jupiter here for you can give you a real desire to improve your level of fitness. It can make you quite canny around squeezing the most from your resources. If there are areas of your life that you can refine in some way, Jupiter is going to give you a lot of encouragement. Jupiter in the 6th house is about discipline as well, and of course Jupiter can be about expansion and being very hopeful that things will work out amazingly well. So a degree of discipline needs to be in the mix. But if you're looking for a new job, it's likely that something over the next 12 months or more will capture your imagination. Now, from May the 17th through to June the 16th, there's a beautiful conjunction between the reversing North Node at this point in Taurus and also Jupiter. And this can be very lucky. So if you needed to have some medical treatment, or you were wanting to get yourself a new pet, 6th house is animals, or move those jobs, or live a more virtuous life in terms of your diet and your consumption of the things we all like, but we know we need to have in moderation, and it can creep up when we're a bit stressed. Great opportunity to grapple with those things at that time. Also, if you have been someone who's quite self-sacrificing and helpful towards others, you could get a lot of plaudits and appreciation during that period. Now, May the 19th sees the Taurus new moon. Again, this is augmenting all this energy in your 6th house, but it actually forges a really great link with Mars in your 8th. If you wanted to squeeze more from your resources, this is a great time to do it. Now, May the 20th is really exciting for your sign in particular, Sagittarius, because Mars moves into your 9th house. Now, Mars, of course, is about passion, but it also rules your 2nd decan. So it's very much part of your identity. And it means that it gives you drive. The 9th house is where we explore, where we're attracted to travel. It's where we might think of a foreign language. It might be that we want to lead a bit more of a rugged existence. So you have this through to July the 10th. So this would be a great time to think about a vacation or a holiday for sure. However, on May the 21st, Mars goes into an immediate opposition with Pluto. You could find yourself having a heated discussion at this time. Wouldn't be like you, Sagittarius, would it? Of course, you're someone who has a big idea. You know, you see the width of situations, and you also have a tremendous thirst for knowledge, and that means that you're often better informed than a lot of people. So you could encounter someone who's a bit dogmatic around this time, and you might feel the need to just let them know what the truth of the situation is. But if you are travelling, just be aware your desire to be very unrestricted, which is a very innate part of your nature, can really be maxed up at that time. So any kind of restrictions at all could see you getting a little bit frustrated. Now, June the 1st sees that exact conjunction between Jupiter and the North Node, so that's the exact point. But June the 6th, probably one of the most exciting events of the whole year for your sign, because Venus moves into Leo, your sister fire sign. Going to be there for 4.5 months. If you are single, someone can come into your world and absolutely dazzle you between then and the 9th of October. But don't expect this person to be necessarily a similar type of person that you've encountered before. This could be really fresh. Alternatively, if you've ever thought about living overseas, you could find yourself house hunting. You know, whether you want to live in Thailand or France or, somewhere that's a little bit more exotic or different or freedom loving or even off grid. This can all be exciting, but in a romantic context, Venus in the 9th house makes you a seeker of truth. I think that's true of you anyway, but that's going to be really emphasised during this period of time. Because the 9th house is about freedom, with Venus and Mars, they're not exactly conjunct, they're pretty close. I think what they're saying to you is that if you're in a relationship which is really restricting your ability to be truly yourself, you may rethink it at this stage. June the 11th, Pluto returns to your 2nd house. You've been thinking about some new ideas. They may need just a little bit more thinking through in terms of the practicalities, but your clarity will become much more translucent by the start of January 24. Now Saturn does go retrograde on June the 17th. Frustrations around where you're living could reach a little bit of a heightened point between then and the 4th of November. So for example, if you can't find somewhere to live, you're having to stay somewhere temporarily, or it feels the place you are is too small, or kids have moved on and you're rattling around a bit, but you've got the familiarity of where you've lived and the memories, and it's difficult to let go of that space, even if it might be the right practical thing to do. So those could be some issues that you're considering between then and the 4th of November. However, the Gemini new moon, which occurs on the 18th of June, ordinarily would be wonderful for you for the following month in terms of relationship prospects. This one squares up with Neptune. Once more, Neptune is providing the cosmic fly in the ointment. And remember, Neptune's very dissolving. It's a swirling mist. It's gassy. It's not very substantive. It's in your 4th house of emotion. It can make you very compassionate and caring, and has probably brought that side of your nature out in a very strong way since 2012, but also at times makes it more difficult for you to maintain your boundaries. Neptune tends to dissolve boundaries. So the relating sign of Gemini is asking you to reach in to understand how other people feel, but you may find it frustrating if they keep seeming to change their position or not being very clear themselves, not helping you to know what you're coming up against. Fortunately, the summer solstice on June the 21st, ushering in the move of the sun into the sign of Cancer and the 2nd cardinal quadrant of 23 itself. So the backdrop for us all over the following 13 weeks is about where we live, how secure we feel. But for you in particular, this is the 8th house of deep transformations. And on this particular event, Venus and Mars are within about 3 or 4 degrees of one another in a conjunction. So if you are looking for a very, very profound connection to someone, whether it's the whole package, the relating, the friendship, the sexual attraction, the intimacy, if you want the whole package, this is a very exciting cardinal quadrant too for you personally. But I think also if you're in a relationship which isn't giving you all the things you desire, it could see you thinking about moving on. Jupiter, your ruler, is actually in a very secure angle to Saturn on that event. So some changes could happen over the following 13 weeks, which are really good for you. July the 12th, however, North Node returns to your sister fire sign of Aries through till the 29th of January 2025. And this is, the North Node is like a collective pull. but it's also, of course, where we manifest our outcome for our past behaviour. So if you've been diligently trying to understand the practical qualities you have, but now you want to add some form to the function, this is a great opportunity to really shine and come out of yourself more. Even though Saturn could make you a bit more inward, especially with Neptune and those midpoints, this is an opportunity for you to sparkle. You need to seize it. Now, July the 17th sees a Cancer new moon, so a good time to think about raising finance for a property or to try to squeeze a bit more out of those long-term assets. It is actually forging a great link with Uranus, so a balance of being open-minded but innovative can be very good for you financially. Now, July the 23rd, a bit more challenging because Venus goes into a retrograde through till September the 3rd. The issue of the truth of your relationship becomes a really big hot topic. So even if there's something that's really exciting you about someone, it needs to feel real and authentic. And if it doesn't, Venus's retrograde can see you rethinking. August the 1st, there is a full moon in your sector of everyday communication. Anything to do with documents over the next couple of weeks requires care. However, your ruler Jupiter forges another great angle with Mars. Remember, you had that at the start of the year, which points towards if you have courage and faith in what you want to do and you're prepared to act swiftly when it feels right, that can work for you well. So you get another shot of this great aspect between the two. It's just this time they're both in earth signs. Earth signs ask us to get tangible benefits. It's very much like the batons in tarot. Now, Mercury goes into an opposition with Saturn on August the 1st. If there's something profoundly out of balance between your home and professional world, you're probably going to need to have some quite serious conversations at this point. But August the 16th sees one of the high points of this whole year for you, because there's a Leo new moon, which ordinarily would be great for you, pushing you to embrace your more adventurous spirit, but it combines with Venus. Now, I know Venus is in a retrograde, but this could be quite lucky, if you're trying to snaffle a last minute bargain in terms of a travel opportunity, or if you meet someone on a holiday, it could be a very passionate holiday romance, or it could just be that the new moon in your sector of higher truths with Venus there brings compassion into the way that you view relationships, which could be enormously valuable. Now, August the 23rd, however, there is a retrograde on Mercury. The third of the year so far, once more in an earth sign, so you can see that managing your practical strands is really a big deal this year. And this one goes on through to the 15th of September, and it's in your sector of work and ambition. If you're applying for jobs, the detail is absolutely crucial. Perhaps having a different type of CV for different roles you go for, but making sure if you're talking to someone in a position of influence that you represent yourself with real clarity. Now, August the 27th, Mars moves into your 11th house of friendship, where it will be for 6 weeks. That's good. That's going to see you reaching out and connecting. However, on August the 29th, Uranus does go into a retrograde again. If you are in a job which you find dull, repetitive, boring, irritating, I really think Jupiter, which is also about to go retrograde itself on September the 4th, despite Jupiter's retrograde, with Uranus as well, they're pushing you to rethink, so you find something that gives you the satisfaction, which is very important. Now, August the 31st does see a really tricky full moon in your 4th house of Pisces, because it's conjunct Saturn. So working hard at trying to understand what makes you tick, it's probably something that's a lifetime exercise for most of us. That becomes very much to the fore in the first 2 weeks of September. Venus does go direct though on September the 3rd. Maybe you're going to get that greater clarity on that relationship. But as I said, September the 4th, your ruler goes into a retrograde, and it will be retrograde to all but the last day of the year. And it's in your 6th house. Maybe it is that you've been trying to reform areas of your everyday structures, refine things, focus on the things that are really essential. Maybe there's a bit more thinking to do. September the 15th sees a Virgo new moon in your sector of success, in a great link with Uranus. A job offer could come in the following 4 weeks, but it probably will come about in precisely the opposite way to what you think it might. Also, September the 15th sees Mercury go direct in Virgo, so that's good with anything to do with the professional sphere. Now, on September the 23rd, we have the autumnal equinox, and the third cardinal quadrant of 23, ushering the sun into the sign of Libra. And for us all, for the following 13 weeks, relationships are very much at the centre of our thinking. On this event for you, however, the midpoint is in your 12th house, but it's opposite Jupiter in your 6th. Someone could tell you something in the following 13 weeks, or you could discover inner resources that may surprise you somewhat. Dive deep, you can learn a lot. But unfortunately, the sun, as it goes into Libra, does jar in a quincunx with Saturn in the sign of Pisces. So I think this one's saying that when it comes to your friendships and future hopes, it's very important that you're connecting with people that you can relate to in a way which is very much in keeping with this greater sensitivity that you're working with this year, and this need to really feel everything much more vividly, the feeling. Don't just embrace the action part of the year. Very important to feel, and that's what this transition is asking you to do. Now, the October the 12th influence is Mars moving into your 12th house. This can be quite turbulent for 6 weeks, may stir up some old residual angers and frustrations. Sometimes with Mars in the 12th house, we can find ourselves tearful, the next minute feeling quite shouty. It just depends on your unique situation. But the Libra solar eclipse of October the 14th is a really good one, because it conjuncts, I should say more formally, Mercury. So your thinking and your ability to connect with groups of people and network, often a great strength of yours, that's really emphasised. But on the other end of the spectrum of the eclipse is the North Node. So I think this can be quite lucky for you in the last quarter of the year. The lunar eclipse, however, that occurs on October the 20th, it occurs in Taurus again, just like the one that occurred in November last year, but this time Saturn's actually a very helpful asset, whereas last year Uranus was very disruptive, and of course Saturn was very disruptive too. So that's better. Then we have the Scorpio new moon on November the 1st, again being in touch with that shadow, hidden and psychological part of our nature is vital. Saturn goes direct on the 4th, and then a marvellous event, because on November the 24th, Mars storms into your sign, and also the new moon on December the 12th in Sagittarius is conjunct Mars. This is going to give you a tremendous drive as the curtain comes down on this year. Mercury does go retrograde on December the 13th, again in Capricorn, so the 4th retrograde of the year, really, and it then inverses into your sign on December the 23rd. So it could be that there's a few cross wires. You're going to have to, communicate who you are and what you want with real precision at the end of this year. The winter solstice occurs on December the 22nd in 23, so one day later than the year before. And guess what? The midpoint is in Pisces, but this time conjunct Saturn. You're not going to get away. It's not just Saturn this year, Sagittarius. It's far, far more than that. It's all those midpoints, and it's Neptune particularly. But this one could show you how far you've come in understanding your emotional needs, the need for security, to be protective, to stop and pause and process your feelings, not necessarily always be moving on to that next dramatic and exciting thing, which is a marvellous part of your nature. But if you want to stop creating those sort of bits and pieces of leftovers emotionally, this is a great year to really tackle that. Also, the Sun and Mercury, though Mercury is in a retrograde, are forging a great link to your ruler and a great link to Saturn. So the first 13 weeks of 2024 are going to be really interesting, and your ruler Jupiter goes direct on the 30th, just in time for those New Year celebrations. And I think that with Pluto going more fully into Aquarius at the start of 24, that's really going to be a massive new epoch for many of us. But for you in particular, the focus for many years has been the foundations of your situation. I think this year it's very much about the emotional identity of yourself, your relationships, getting more confident about saying who you are, what you need, setting your boundaries, but at the same time enjoying all that wonderful fifth house energy through those two Aries new moons, one an eclipse, and the North Node. So demonstrating to people how amazingly talented you can be, but get the basic world at the core of your existence really working well. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Take care and goodbye for now.